The Honorable President.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we willingly acknowledge you as the supreme being, most gracious and most merciful. Look down, we beseech you, on us who are members of this Senate, and deign to assist us in the duties that we have to perform on behalf of our beloved country of Trinidad and Tobago. Open our eyes to see the truth and help us to accept it with all its implications into our lives. Direct us, O Lord, in our deliberations, so that setting aside private interests, unwholesome prejudices, and personal affections, we may treat all matters set before us with honesty, courage, and conviction. Through all we say and do in this Senate, may we give glory and honor to your holy name, inspire confidence in our fellow citizens, and make a positive contribution to the peace and prosperity of our nation. Amen.
Oath or affirmation announcements by the President.
Honorable Senators, I have granted leave of absence to Senator the Honorable Jennifer Baptiste-Primus, who is out of the country. Honorable Senators, I have received the following correspondence from Her Excellency, the President, Paula May Weeks, ORTT. The Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, by Her Excellency Paula May Weeks, ORTT, President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. To Mr. Gerald Ramdeen. Whereas by the provisions of Section 43(2)(e) of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, the President, in exercise of the power vested in her and acting in accordance with the advice of the Leader of the Opposition, is empowered to declare the seat of a senator to be vacant. Now, therefore, I, Paula May Weeks, President as aforesaid, acting in accordance with the advice of the Leader of the Opposition, in exercise of the power vested in me by the said Section 43(2)(e) of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby declare the seat of you, Gerald Ramdeen, to be vacant with effect from the 6th of May, 2019. Given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 10th day of May, 2019. To Mr. Ashvani Mahabir, in exercise of the power vested in me by Section 42(b) of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, I, Paula May Weeks, President as aforesaid, do hereby appoint you, Mr. Ashvani Mahabir, a senator with effect from the 15th of May, 2019, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President St. Anne's, this 15th day of May, 2019. To Mr. Ndale Young, whereas Senator the Honorable Jennifer Baptiste-Primus is incapable of performing her duties as a senator by reason of her absence from Trinidad and Tobago. Now, therefore, I, Paula May Weeks, President as aforesaid, acting in accordance with the advice of the Prime Minister, in exercise of the power vested in me by Section 44(1)(a) and Section 44(4)(a) of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby appoint you, Ndale Young, to be temporarily a member of the Senate with effect from the 15th of May, 2019, and continuing during the absence from Trinidad and Tobago of the said Senator the Honorable Jennifer Baptiste-Primus, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President St. Anne's, this 14th day of May, 2019. Honorable Senators are required to take the oath.
I, Ashvani Mahabir, having been appointed a member of Parliament, do swear by Bhagavad Gita that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago upon which I am about to enter.
I, Ndali Young, having been appointed a member of Parliament, do solemnly affirm that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, and will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago upon which I am about to enter. Bills brought from the House of Representatives on the supplemental order paper, the Finance Supplementary Appropriation Financial Year 2019 Bill 2019, in the name of the Minister of Finance.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Madam President, I'd like to move that this bill be taken later in the proceedings.
Honourable Senators, the question is that the next stage of the bill be taken later in the proceedings. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The next stage of the bill will be taken later in the proceedings.
Petitions, papers.
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Madam President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers listed on the order paper in my name. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries to the 20th report of the Public Accounts Committee on the examination of the report of the Auditor General on the public accounts of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year 2017. Thank you.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper and supplemental order paper in the name of the Minister of Finance. The annual administrative report of the Trinidad and Tobago International Financial Center Management Company Limited for the financial year ended June 30, 2017, and the annual audited financial statements of the Telecommunication Services of Trinidad and Tobago Limited for the financial years ended March 31st, 2017 and 2018. Thank you, Madam President.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following paper as listed on the order paper in the name of the Minister of National Security. The annual report of the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board for the period 2015-2016.
Reports from committees.
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Madam President, I have the honor to present the following report as listed on the order paper in the name of Senator Sophia Choate, Senior Counsel. The sixth report of the Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs, 4th Session 2018-2019, 11th Parliament, on an inquiry into the implementation of the new public procurement system. Thank you.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you again, Madam President. Madam President, I have the honor to present the following report as listed on the supplemental order paper in my name. The final report of the Joint Select Committee, 4th Session, 2018-2019, 11th Parliament, established to consider and report on the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Bill 2018. Thank you, Madam President.
Urgent questions?
Senator Mark.
Thank you, Madam President. To the Minister of Public Utilities. In light of the Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries statement that farmers from Aranguez were not using drain water to water their food crops, can the Minister indicate whether WASA would be instructed to return the farmers' pumps?
Minister of Public Utilities.
Madam President, as we are all aware, we are experiencing a water crisis. In keeping with their responsibilities, WASA police have been increasing vigilance in communities so as to ensure restrictions placed under the hose ban are kept and that illegal activities regarding the abstraction of water from watercourses without authorization are minimized. In one of these routine surveillance work, on Saturday, the 11th of May, the WASA officials, while executing their duties, seized 4 pumps from individuals who, based on evidence before them, were breaking the law. Charges have been laid, and this matter is now before the court. The pumps were seized as evidence in keeping with routine police practice. Madam President, we live in a society governed by law. It is outside the purview of any minister to instruct or direct police officials. This is not the practice of ministers under this government, and it is not one that I intend to start. My policy position to WASA is to increase the level of vigilance in light of the prevailing dry season, and which is within my purview. The police at WASA are trained to do their job, and I expect that they will exercise their responsibility without fear or favor, malice or ill will.
Senator Mark.
Yeah, Madam President, in light of the fact that these police officers, or WASA police, are trained, as the Minister has indicated, and given what the Honorable Minister of Agriculture discovered, can the Minister indicate whether the WASA police may have erred on this particular matter when they seized the pumps of these farmers of Aranguez?
Minister.
Madam President, first I want to draw a little bit bring into the House the idea of timing. One, this matter that I'm reporting on happened on Saturday, the 11th of May. Secondly, as I said, the charges before the individuals relate to, or what the WASA police, under their purview, the extraction of water from courses without an appropriate license, for which the pumps were taken. As I said, I have noted the observation of my colleague, but we are talking about 2 different times, and it is not for me as the minister to determine whether the WASA police have erred or not. I do not. That's for the court. That is for the court to decide. I do not instruct the WASA police based on the evidence provided and based on what I have seen from the police report. They are in keeping, they are within their rights to do what they are doing, and they are exercising their responsibility.
Mark.
I'll go to the next question, Madam President.
Yeah. Next question, Senator Mark.
To the Minister of National Security. Given the May 13th 2019 discovery of several automatic weapons hidden in a barrel containing foodstuff. Can the minister indicate what measures will be effected to tighten border control and avoid recurrence?
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Madam President, I thank Senator Mark for this question. I want to point out that this recent fine of the importation of illegal firearms at the port was a fine by Customs and Excise, which is the entity charged with the legislative authority to search upon entry in Trinidad and Tobago, and in particular at legal ports of entry. Madam President, the Customs and Excise Division is under the Ministry of Finance, and on behalf of all the citizens of this country, I congratulate them on their vigilance, and it is a sign that the work that has to be done is being done, and we're very thankful for this find. Nevertheless, Madam President, the Ministry of National Security has been encouraging all arms of law enforcement to work closer together on information sharing and operations. The Minister of National Security has held meetings relating to the improvement of border security. There is, Madam President, always additional work to be done at the legal ports of entry because, of course, persons involved in illegal activities are always trying to find ways in which they can penetrate the system. Madam President, the Ministry of National Security will continue to work with the Ministry of Finance along with Customs and Excise to improve what currently exists at all the ports of legal entry and wherever else the ministries have determined that persons involved in illegal activity may wish to compromise. Thank you.
Senator, next question, Senator Mark.
To the Minister of National Security, in light of the recent escape of 8 prisoners from the remand yard Golden Grove, can the minister explain the circumstances that led to said escape?
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Madam President, I once joked to my friend that one day he'll ask an urgent question on an issue that has not arisen as yet. He comes very close with this question. Madam President, this matter is very recent. It remains very sensitive simply because there are ongoing efforts to locate the escapees. And Madam President, it would not be prudent at this stage to discuss anything relating to the circumstances of this escape. I'm sure at the appropriate time, the Minister of National Security would provide the information to the public. And for now, all arms of national security are working together to recapture the escapees. I thank you.
Senator Mark.
Can the minister indicate when these prisoners escaped from custody?
Minister.
Madam President, I'm not in a position to provide that information.
Mark.
To the Honorable Minister of Education, Madam President.
Next question.
Yes, I'm going to.
Next question, Senator Mark.
To the Minister of Education, given the recent ice-pick attack on a teacher in Aruca in the presence of her students, can the minister indicate whether any counseling is being offered to the students?
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam President. The simple answer to that question is yes. Counseling services were provided and continue to be provided by a team of guidance officers and the social workers of the Student Support Services Division of the Ministry of Education, who visited the school yesterday and met with the students and provided counseling and intervention services. Further, personnel from the Employee Assistance Program also visited and provided support for members of staff. Madam President, follow-up services for students and the teachers will be provided as the need arises. Thank you very much.
Senator Mark.
Madam President, may I ask through you, how can the minister explain or share with the Senate what would have facilitated a stranger who invaded the compound of this particular school without being detected by the security personnel at the time. Can the minister share with us what may have led to this development that resulted in this teacher being assaulted?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam President. As I have indicated elsewhere, there was a breach in the protocol arrangements that are in place for all our schools. And just let me explain that further. There are provisions that must be followed by the security officers in terms of entry and exit of our schools. If a person arrives at the school, the security officer is the first person that person has to come into contact with. The security officer has the responsibility to inquire of that person his or her business. If the security officer is convinced that that business is legitimate, then the security officer has to escort that person to the office of the principal. The principal or the vice principal or others in authority will take it from there. What had happened was simply a breach in the protocol with respect to the security officer. Thank you.
The honourable senators, the time for urgent questions has expired.
Questions on notice, questions for oral answer.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, the government is pleased to announce that we will be answering questions number 142, 144, 153, and 254. We ask for a 2-week deferral of question number 143 and question number 255. With regards to written answers, we ask for a 2-week deferral of question number 245. Question 256 is not yet due.
Questions numbers 143, 255, and 245 are deferred for 2 weeks. Senator Mark.
Thank you, Madam President. Question number 142 to the Minister of Public Utilities.
Minister of Public Utilities.
Madam President, this matter was the subject of an internal investigation by an audit committee in 2013 and the previous board of TSTT in 2014. However, in light of new concerns which have resurfaced, the existing board of TSTT on the 22nd of February 2019 procured the services of the firm PricewaterhouseCoopers Advisory Services Limited to undertake an independent assessment relating to these contracts. The assessment will include a review of all prior internal investigations, as well as all information relevant to this matter, including new information which has been obtained subsequent to the conduct of the internal investigations. PwC is expected to submit its report in 6 to 8 weeks' time. The board of TSTT will be guided by the findings and recommendations of the report.
Can the minister indicate, Madam President, since PwC was appointed on the 22nd of February, can the minister indicate whether, well, first of all, can he share with us the actual time frame given to PwC to complete its report? In other words, was it 5 months? Was it 3 months? Was it 2 months?
Minister.
Madam Speaker, I understand that age is stepping in a little bit. So I will repeat what it is I said. It is PwC is expected to submit its report in 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks' time. I think we are reaching this now. When I based on my calendar and looking at it, we are now around the 7th week. My checks with the company, they have not submitted the report. I think they will be able to submit the report within the time frame that I mentioned in my answer, 6 to 8 weeks' time. And when the company gets the report, of course, they will study the report, and then the board of directors will act based on the findings and what it is that they feel based on the report that is before.
Senator Mark.
Madam President, I want to recommend a book.
No, Senator Mark.
But let me ask you a question.
Yes.
There's a book that I want to recommend to you,
Oh,
but I'll leave that for later. Yes. Madam President, in light of the fact that the key individual involved in this exercise, who happens to be the CEO of this company, can the minister advise this Senate whether that individual was suspended whilst PwC conducted its inquiries into this $30 million activity?
Minister.
Madam Speaker, the simple answer to that, Madam President, my apologies. Madam President, the answer to that is no, but I also want to mention that, as I said before, this matter was investigated by a previous board audit committee. This matter, after the investigations by the previous, a board appointed by the previous government, they actually promoted the person in question. This matter was then investigated again by that board. This matter was reviewed by this existing board, and they found that based on all of the allocations that were made, that they were not founded. As an additional caution, they have asked for an independent PwC to review all facts, including the decisions that were taken by the previous government's recommended board. And then, and in light of that, there was no need to then take any actions against the particular sitting CEO in light of the investigation that is being conducted.
Senator Mark.
Can I ask the minister if he can share with the Senate what were the terms of reference, Madam President, of this PwC inquiry?
Minister.
Madam President, I again read from what it is I said in my original answer. The assessment will include a review of all prior internal investigations, as well as all information relevant to this matter, including new information which has been obtained subsequent to the conduct of the internal investigation.
Madam President, through you, can I ask the Honorable Minister who is seeking to be the next Prime Minister, can I ask him? Sorry, ma'am, I withdraw. Can I ask the goodly Minister of Public Utilities if he can share with us, Madam President, the cost of this contract that was awarded to PwC to conduct this particular inquiry? Can you share with this Honorable Senate the cost involved? Madam President, through you.
Minister.
Madam President, no, that information is not available, but I'm sure I'm free to provide it if a proper question is posed to me.
Yes, thank you. Question, Senator Mark.
I am back again at this gentleman.
No, Senator Mark.
Yes, sorry.
Please don't personalize.
I'm not personalizing,
Yes.
Madam President. I just want you to read a book called...
No, Senator Mark, please. It's too early to be talking about reading books.
Okay, thank you, thank you. It's a very important book. Question number 144, Madam President, to the Minister of Public Utilities.
Minister of Public Utilities.
Madam President, The Mayaro Gwaigwari pipe-borne water is supplied from a number of indigenous sources located in Gwaigwari: Stonebright, South Maloney, Cedar Grove, and is supplemented by the Navet water treatment plant. Under normal conditions, the area receives a pipe-borne water supply schedule on an average of every 2 to 3 days. However, recently, the water supply to the area was adversely affected by, 1, a 38-hour emergency shutdown of the Navet water treatment plant from Thursday the 9th to Saturday the 11th of February 2019, and 2, a number of leaks along the 6-inch pipeline which provides water to the Newlands and on the Gwaigwari Road. The schedules were normalized by February the 20th, 2019 as a result of the following initiatives. 1, the repair of 28 leaks on the distribution pipelines in the area between the Stonebright water treatment plant and the Double Bright booster station over the period December the 1st, 2018 to February the 25th, 2019. The re-establishment of a full pumping capacity at the Double Bright booster station, which served the community of Newlands, La Saiva, and Gwaigwari Road. The re-establishment of full pumping capacity at the San Pedro booster station, which transmits water from the Navet water treatment to the area, serves the community, including Bristol, Union, McAfee, etc. During the period of disruption in water supply, affected residents were provided a truck-borne supply of water.
Can I ask the Honourable Minister whether the severe water shortfall or shortage that affected this community, can the minister indicate from reports whether that situation has been addressed with the revival of the Navet water treatment plant, as well as repairs of leaks in the main water pipeline? Can you give this House the assurance that the extent of those shortages have been reasonably addressed? Madam President.
Minister.
Madam Speaker, yes, I could give the assurance. I could give the assurance that the leaks that were identified along the roads that was adversely affecting the area, they have all been repaired. That being said, we do have an aging infrastructure, and the pipelines along those roads are in dire need of changing, and that is something that needs to be done over a period of time. So there might be reoccurring leaks. In addition to that, the amount of water in the Navet water treatment plant in that particular area, which normally produces about 20 million gallons of water per day, was reduced to 15 million gallons of water per day. We have now ramped it back up to around 16. It is still below the capacity or long-term average, but that particular dam has been the worst affected dam, whereby it is now 30% below the long-term average. So those areas will continue to be challenged as we manage the flow of water coming from the Navet water treatment plants. We have ramped up the number of trucks, so truck-borne supply of water in that particular area, and I am in constant contact personally with the MP of that area to ensure that I try to alleviate as much as possible the hardship on the residents of that area. Thank you.
Can the minister indicate, Madam President, whether customers are still being forced to pay exorbitant prices for the supply of truck-borne water in that community? Can you verify if that continues, and whether the WASA police? I shouldn't ask because you'll tell me it's 2 questions. So I'm just asking one more.
And Senate, I won't allow that question.
Well, could I ask you, Madam President, how many more questions I have, ma'am?
2, I believe.
Yeah. Can I ask the Honorable Minister, how many leaks have WASA estimated in that particular community of Mayaro? Can you tell us?
Senator Mark, I believe in the original answer, information was, well, the information was given.
Good.
So, Senator Mark, next question. You have one more.
Okay, Madam President. Madam President, can the Honorable Minister indicate, given the aging infrastructure as outlined, whether, for instance, monies are going to be allocated very shortly to address the leaks and the repair and replacement of pipelines to that community? Madam President, can I ask that question?
Minister?
Madam President, the repairs of pipeline, of leaks throughout the area, and the changing of pipelines, as I have identified before, there are about 3,500 kilometers of pipes that are over the age of 40 to 50 years old. And there's about 245 kilometers of pipe that are in urgent need of repairs. If I'm not mistaken, I recall that particular area is one of them. It is engaging our attention, and we are fixing all of the pipes as financing allows us to do.
Next question, Senator Obika.
Thank you, Madam President. Question number 253 to the Minister of Health.
Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Answer to part 1. The number of laboratory-confirmed cases of malaria in Trinidad and Tobago for the period 2017 to present are as follows. 2017, 12 confirmed cases, of which all were imported. 2018, 40 confirmed cases, of which 2 were local and 38 were imported. As of March 31st, 2019, there were 5 confirmed cases, all of which were imported. Part 2. To date, there are no deaths resulting from any of the above laboratory-confirmed malaria cases. Part 3. The following measures were and are being implemented to manage the confirmed cases of malaria. A. In July 2018, almost 10 months ago, the establishment of an interministerial committee to respond to the threat of malaria in Trinidad and Tobago, tasked with providing oversight, direction, and advice to the Minister of Health, as well as developing policies and strategies for the prevention of malaria reintroduction and the strengthening of capacity to respond to malaria. The committee brings together stakeholders in a holistic approach to treat with the threat of malaria and comprises the representatives of the following ministries and bodies, including the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Finance, Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, National Security, Tourism, the Tobago House of Assembly, the Caribbean Public Health Agency, and the Pan American Health Organization. The committee has recently developed a national action plan that focuses on the following key pillars: human surveillance and migration to train officers at air and seaports to identify all entrants and leavers with symptoms of malaria; vector control and the environment for the application of treatment, environmental and entomological surveillance and investigation of contacts; clinical intervention with the use of WHO protocol for the treatment and care of persons affected with malaria; public education to ensure both regular ports of entry, sea and airport, and immigration centers are provided with the health education materials to travelers and migrants; risk communication strategies to mitigate the risk and provide a response to the malaria outbreak if it occurs and has occurred, presently occurring in Venezuela, and the migration of Venezuelans into our country. The use of rapid diagnostic testing kits to expedite the identification of the malaria parasite in persons presenting with symptoms of malaria. This supports earlier application of treatment, environmental and entomological surveillance, investigation of contacts, and especially the application of vector control measures within a 1-mile radius of a case of malaria, including the use of indoor residual spraying, thermal fogging, and/or ultra-low volume activity. The use of standard operating procedures in accordance with WHO organization protocols for the laboratory confirmation of a suspected case of malaria, where the immediate use of medication is applied daily until 6 consecutive negative daily smears are obtained. Thereafter, the patient is discharged, and with continuous monitoring, as smears are done once weekly for 6 weeks, and then once monthly for 6 to 12 months. And finally, the use of a GIS system to support vector control and surveillance measures through the provision of a high-quality mapping, as well as spatial and temporal analyses of disease, entomological, environmental, and relevant data sets to make an informed decision on the use of resources. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Senator Obika.
Thanks, Madam President, and I thank the Minister for that detailed answer. Can the Honourable Minister indicate for the public knowledge if there are any how they can distinguish between having the common cold, symptoms of the common cold versus malaria, if there are any similarities? And
That question doesn't arise. Next question.
regarding the indication that the Minister has focused on getting national security and immigration involved, can the Honourable Minister indicate if there are any heat monitors or sensors at ports of entry, given that many of the cases are imported?
Minister.
Madam Speaker, the use of heat monitors and sensors at airports and points of entry is very controversial and does not provide accurate data. What we do on ships and planes, the pilots of planes have to fill out a form, and port health goes on to those aircraft, and before anybody can disembark, that form confirms with the pilot's signature as the person in charge whether anybody on a plane presents with an unusual fever. The same thing happens with ships, cruise ships, and so on, and that is how you monitor at ports of entry via aircraft or via sea transport. Thank you very much.
Another question.
Final question. Can the Honourable Minister indicate if they have been able to identify particular areas in Trinidad and Tobago that malaria is more prevalent, given the response?
Minister.
Thank you very much. Madam President, malaria is spread by the Anopheles mosquito, as opposed to the Aedes aegypti, which spreads dengue and so on. The Anopheles mosquito generally, but not exclusively, prefers brackish water around swampy areas, whereas the Aedes aegypti prefers clean, clear, standing water. So locally transmitted cases, of which we have always had about 1 or 2 per year, they will tend to be around swampy areas. However, imported cases which come in, we have no control over those. So that is the type of geographical spatial prevalence of malaria. But let me confirm again, in terms of locally acquired cases, we have always had in this country about 1 or 2 per year. The majority of cases are imported cases. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Next question, Senator Obika.
Thank you, Madam President. Question number 254 to the Attorney General.
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Madam President, on January 15, 2019, the Honorable Attorney General wrote to his counterpart, the Honorable Attorney General of Australia, Christian Porter, MP. Madam President, the Honorable Attorney General did so because he felt obliged to respond to the unsubstantiated allegations made by Mr. Devant Maraj in what can only be described as a blatant attempt to mislead both the Australian government and the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam President, the Attorney General provided a copy of the Prime Minister's official statement refuting the said allegations. Madam President, in response to the question by letter dated 27 February 2019, Mr. Porter responded and indicated that the matter was referred to the Australian Federal Police. I thank you.
Okay.
Public business, government business, bill second reading.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Supplement the Appropriation of the Sum, the issue of which was authorized by the Appropriation Financial Year 2019 Act 2018, Act number 16 of 2018, be now read a second time. Madam President, I rise to open debate on this bill, and my presentation today will focus on supplementation of $1,839,000,000 in 18 areas, the current domestic economic scenario, updates on major institutional projects, significant financial year 2019 infrastructural projects, major education, health and housing programs, and the mid-year fiscal outturn. Madam President, this administration assumed office in 2015 under the astute leadership of our esteemed Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Keith Rowley. Since then, the global economy has been shifting, and the shadow it casts continues to dominate the domestic economy. Madam President, this is a finance bill, and it has been passed in the other place. The bill provides for supplementation of the appropriation for the financial year 2019 in the sum of $1,839,189,300 to fund urgent and critical recurrent and capital expenditure to September 30, 2019. The supplementary appropriation is being sought by way of finance, supplementary appropriation finance year 2019 Bill 2019, and includes a variation of appropriation in the sum of $20,187,071. Madam President, four of the heads of expenditure require supplementation in excess of $200 million. They are as follows. The Ministry of Finance requires $709 million to reimburse the Infrastructure Development Fund vote, from which funds were transferred to finance the exit costs associated with the Petroleum Company of Trinidad and Tobago Limited, Petrotrin. The Ministry of National Security requires the sum of $207 million, $124 million of which is to pay outstanding bills to TSTT for the provision of CCTV camera services. $20 million is to pay outstanding bills to MTS for janitorial services undertaken within the Fire Service Department. $12 million is to facilitate the continuation of the Civilian Conservation Corps program for the period July to September 2019. $44 million is to replenish funds to the Strategic Services Agency, which was utilized to settle a civil court matter. And finally, under Ministry of National Security, the sum of $7 million is required under the development program to fund the service contract for repairs and maintenance of the damaged vessels utilized by the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard. The Ministry of Public Utilities requires the sum of $200 million to meet the outstanding amounts owed to DeSalcott for the supply of desalinated water. The Ministry of Social Development and Family Services requires the sum of $227,548,500 to meet expenditure associated with increases in the senior citizens' pension as a result of the introduction of the new income bands. Also, $90 million was wired to assist flood victims who were affected by the heavy rainfall during October and November 2018 and now needs to be replenished. Madam President, the other heads of expenditure that require funding are as follows. The judiciary requires an additional sum of $57,682,800. The sum of $31,682,800 is required to pay salaries and arrears of salaries to contract officers of the family court due to the revised terms and conditions of employment. And funds are required to meet the cost of filling critical vacant positions at the criminal division. Further, $26 million is needed to meet other expenditure under goods and services, such as arrears of rent owed from fiscal 2018 and for 2019 at 19 locations, fees for the renewal of subscription for software used at the family court, and services provided by funeral homes and interpreters. Madam President, with respect to the Service Commissions Department, the sum of $3 million is required to meet expenditure pertaining to assessment for the Permanent Secretaries Program and the selection of Deputy Permanent Secretaries and the costs of security services. Under the Office of the Prime Minister, the sum of $12 million is required to facilitate financial support for children assigned to private community residences and to meet salaries and operational costs of the Children's Authority. The Personnel Department requires a sum of $2 million to customize and outfit new office accommodation to which it is soon to be relocated. Under pensions and gratuities, the sum of $18 million is required to facilitate payment of gratuities to contract officers employed in the public service upon satisfaction of their contracts, upon satisfactory and completion of their contracts. Madam President, the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs requires a sum of $50 million to meet the payment of outstanding legal fees for services provided to the ministry. With respect to the Ministry of Education, the sum of $15 million is required. Of this, the sum of $25,800,000 is needed to meet outstanding amounts to invigilators and the cost of examination fees for students. The difference of $24,200,000 is required to pay outstanding balances owed to caterers and suppliers under the school feeding program. Under the Ministry of Labour and Small Enterprise Limited, the sum of $39,258,000 is required to meet increased expenditure as a result of the recruitment of additional on-the-job trainees. With effect from November 2018, an average of 400 trainees per month have been recruited. Madam President, with respect to the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, $39 million is required as follows. $30 million to meet the payment of wages and COLA and goods and services, including scavenging, the provision of water trucking services and rent at the municipal corporations. $8 million is required to pay salaries and COLA and allowances to 220 municipal police officers, and $1 million to provide a subvention to assist the Rural Development Company with its operational expenses. Under the Ministry of Works, the sum of $85,700,000 is required to enable NIDCO to meet the cost of $73 million associated with the charter hire of the high-speed passenger vessel for the inter-island ferry service and to pay severance benefits owed to daily rated workers in the sum of $12.7 million. The Ministry of Housing and Urban Development requires a sum of $48 million, of which $20 million is required to pay contractors for the refurbishment of HEC apartments, $18 million for works to be conducted under the Housing and Village Improvement Program, and $10 million for works to be undertaken in the Greater Port of Spain region. Madam President, with respect to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the sum of $75 million is required to enhance the TTPS's crime-fighting capabilities. The funds are needed to pay salaries and allowances to police officers, salaries and NIS for contract officers engaged to staff specialized units, consultancy services and utilities, and to acquire equipment. Under the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, the sum of $6 million is required to refurbish and procure vehicles for the Embassy and High Commission at Washington and London, respectively. Under the Ministry of Communication, the sum of $10 million is required to meet operational expenses at the Trinidad and Tobago Television Company Limited due to an increase in live broadcast productions. Madam President, it should be noted that funds were provided under the development program of the Ministry of Works and Transport for the construction of the ANR Robinson International Airport. However, Cabinet in September 2018 agreed to rescind that decision. Further, Cabinet agreed that government, through the Ministry of Finance, should enter into a contract with NITCO, the National Infrastructure Development Company Limited, for the provision of procurement, project and contract management services in respect of the construction of the new terminal and associated works at the ANR Robinson International Airport at Crown Point in Tobago. Therefore, the sum of $20,187,071 is being transferred from Head 43, Ministry of Works and Transport, to Head 18, Ministry of Finance. This has resulted in a variation of the appropriation, and it should be noted that the increase and decrease to and from the heads are accommodated within the net supplementary appropriation. Madam President, honorable senators will recall that the 2019 budget projected an overall fiscal deficit of $4,052.1 million, or 2.4% of GDP. For purposes of administration of the budget, an overall deficit of $5.114 million was projected for the period October 2018 to March 2019. However, based on actual revenue received and expenditure incurred, the government recorded a deficit of only $1.850 million in the first 6 months of the fiscal year. This was as a result of a higher than projected revenue of $706 million and a reduction in expenditure of $2.557 billion. Madam President, the Senate is asked to note that the Budget Division, in its mid-year review of the 2019 budget, was cognizant that certain areas require priority funding in spite of the continued need to monitor spending. When these priority areas are included and adjustments made in other areas, total expenditure has been revised to $52,078.4 million, an increase of approximately $302 million. Madam President, honorable senators will also recall that the 2019 budget was predicated on an average oil price of $65 per barrel and a natural gas price of US $2.75 per MMBTU. In my presentation in the 2019 budget, I announced that total revenue was projected at $47,724.2 million. The total expenditure was estimated at $51,776.3 million, with the resultant overall fiscal deficit projected of $4.052 billion. It should be noted that the adjustments included in the supplementary appropriation bill, together with curtailment of expenditure within the heads of expenditure, despite the projected net increase in revenue of $221 million, will result in a moderate increase in the overall position on central government fiscal operations from a deficit of $4.052 billion to $5.6 billion. In respect of the projected $221 million decrease in revenue. It should be noted that taxes from energy companies is anticipated to decrease by $941 million. Taxes from individuals expected to decrease by $305 million, and value-added tax receipts are expected to decrease by $962 million. Madam President, the details of the proposed changes were circulated to all senators, and it is anticipated that during the course of the debate, the proposals contained within the bill will be addressed by various members of government. Further, at this juncture, let me advise this Honourable House that the supplementary appropriation for fiscal 2019 of $1,839 million affects 18 heads of expenditure and comprises recurrent expenditure of $1,777,769,300 and development program expenditure of $61,420,000. Madam President, I wish to advise the Senate that the funds for the supplementary appropriation will be sourced from the consolidated fund from overall savings and expenditure under a number of sub-items and projects across all ministries and departments, as well as from borrowings as required. What is our current domestic economic scenario, Madam President? Madam President, you may recall that in the budget presentation in October last year, we would have recognized a growth figure of 1.9% for 2018, and this was based on the CSO's estimate in its July 2018 outlook. This was revised to 2.1% in the second quarter of 2018 and 1.5% in the third quarter of 2018. We expect the CSO to present revised growth figures for 2018 and 2019 following completion of its work relating to the fourth quarter of 2018. Madam President, the fact that our economy remains resilient is exemplified in the following economic indicators. Public sector debt, which has been rising in the context of consistent fiscal deficits, has now been stabilized around 62% of GDP, well within the standard international benchmarks. We have 9 months of import cover, indicating that our official gross foreign reserves exceed typical benchmarks of reserve adequacy. We have healthy and resilient financial buffers. As at March 31st, 2019, the Heritage and Stabilization Fund balance amounted to $6 million, and foreign exchange reserves at the central bank amounted to $7.350 billion, a combined amount of $13.356 billion. And finally, sound and stable macroeconomic conditions, in particular low and stable inflation, low interest rates, as well as stable exchange rates, have laid the foundation on which savings and investments are generated in an environment of certainty and on which we can continue to grow and develop the economy. Madam President, the sudden collapse of oil and gas prices in 2014, coupled with Trinidad and Tobago's declining oil and gas production, contributed to the curtailment of our major revenue streams, which as a people we have had to contend with since that period. At that time, when oil prices collapsed from US $108 per barrel to $43 per barrel, the annual budgetary expenditure under the previous administration reached an all-time high of $63 billion in 2014. Budget deficits had swollen to $10 billion and resulted in the government's bank account at the central bank being completely depleted and the overdraft facility of $15 billion being siphoned. After 3 years of managing the economy and taking account of our income flows, we are of the view that expenditure and revenue estimates should be in the neighborhood of $50 billion, with some $13 billion less than that which it reached at the peak of the last administration. Madam President, between 2010 and 2015, the government of Trinidad and Tobago benefited from supernormal revenues buoyed by high energy commodity prices. But what they did with it was the more important revelation. Projects that bore little relevance to sustainable economic development prevailed. Even in the face of a rapid decline of oil and gas revenues that commenced in 2014, the extravagance continued. With little breathing room, this administration sequenced economic programs designed to arrest the fallout and began a series of careful adjustments in expenditure to give this country the breathing room to maintain necessary operations and avoid the need to enter an IMF program, an achievement which should not be minimized. In effect, Madam President, we have spared the population, especially the most economically exposed among us, the harsh austerity program that might have compromised our social support systems. However, even with narrowing revenue streams, we did not forget the vulnerable. And I would like to take this opportunity to remind this Honorable Senate of some of the fiscal initiatives we undertook to protect that group. We have increased the personal allowance for individuals from $60,000 to $72,000 per annum, affording the persons who make $6,000 a month or less a tax-free income. This also means that sole traders making $72,000 per year or in net income are now exempt from income taxes. Additionally, in financial year 2019, we raised the threshold for the payment of business levy on gross sales from $200,000 to $360,000. And earlier in our tenure, we increased the VAT threshold from $360,000 to $500,000 so that businesses with gross annual receipts of less than $500,000 are not now required to become VAT registered and to account for VAT. We have increased the food card by $100 for all qualifying groups at a cost of $29.2 million. We have increased the value of the public assistance grant by $150 in all qualifying groups at a cost of $41.4 million. We have increased the qualifying income cap for senior citizens grant to $6,000, thereby expanding the base of eligible senior citizens by almost 27,263 persons at a cost of $194 million. We have amended the stamp duty exemption threshold for residential property from $850,000 to $1.5 million for first-time homeowners at a cost of $12.5 million. We continue to maintain our efforts to reverse the impairments of our fiscal account with both targeted revenue-raising measures and efficient expenditure so as not to adversely impact our nation's citizens. In respect of energy production, Madam President, our medium-term framework envisages a growth of around 2% in 2021, as we are strengthening the other supporting policies, strategies, and reforms to ensure that growth over the long term would be sustainable. The energy sector remains an important driver in our GDP and factors heavily in this medium-term framework. Natural gas production increased in 2018 to an average of 3.63 billion standard cubic feet per day, an 8% increase over the 2017 average of 3.36 BCF per day. Further, gas production continues to increase and is expected to reach an average of 3.8 BCF per day in 2019. Indeed, production is already averaging 3.81 BCF per day in the first quarter of 2019. Petroleum production is projected to stabilize in 2019 and thereafter trend steadily upwards from 60,000 barrels per day in 2019 to over 80,000 barrels per day in 2023. And this is strongly influenced by the activities of the Heritage Petroleum Company Limited, which has begun to ramp up its exploration and production activities, and this will factor significantly in the expanded output. It is hoped that, following the robust procurement process, for a refinery investor operator to assume control and operation of the refining plant now housed at Garakara Refining Limited, that an operator will soon be identified and that the operations can resume by December 2019 without the $2 billion a year burden previously borne by the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Caribbean Gas Chemicals Limited, methanol to dimethyl ether plant at La Brea, is also scheduled to commence operations this year and is expected to generate lasting high employment and empowerment in that area. In respect of our institutional projects, Madam President, I first refer to the matter in respect of which I laid a report this morning. That is the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority. The Ministry of Finance is proceeding with efforts are continuing to establish the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority. The draft legislation was before a Joint Select Committee of Parliament, which held consultations with stakeholders. The final report of that committee was submitted in the other place just 2 days ago and in this place this morning. The next stage is to debate the report and hopefully pass the long-awaited bill with the support of all parliamentarians so that we can raise the performance of that most significant arm of government machinery. The groundwork for establishing the TTRA continues to progress at a steady pace with the completion of the strategic framework for the operation of the TTRA, the business process re-engineering component, and the drafting of a detailed organization design for the new entity, which will promote greater efficiency and effectiveness in revenue collection. Work on the job classification and evaluation exercise is nearing completion, and continuous extensive stakeholder engagements continue to inform the process for the establishment of the TTRA. With respect to the gambling industry, the Joint Select Committee has completed its clause-by-clause review of the bill and has thoroughly examined and considered the gambling consultant's report. In this regard, both the list of amendments and the consolidated bill are completed and under the review of the Honorable Attorney General. Once approved, it will be submitted to the committee for inclusion in the final report to be laid in the Parliament. It is anticipating that the Gambling, Gaming and Betting Control Bill 2016 will be debated during the course of this year. To update you on our major infrastructural projects. The new dry dock and shipping repair facility at La Brea, the market assessment and feasibility studies have been completed for that facility, and we are aiming via public-private partnership to roll out the project in July of this year. The Moruga Agro-Processing and Light Industrial Park will soon transit from design to construction stage. The San Fernando-Point Fortin Highway works are in progress with completion scheduled to December 2020. The Churchill-Roosevelt Highway extension to Sangre Grande is being constructed in phases with completion scheduled for January 2020. The Valencia to Toco Highway is now at an advanced stage of design completion and environmental impact assessment. The Moruga Main Road is being rehabilitated with scheduled completion in 2021. The coastal protection works in several areas are re-establishing coastal communities. Preparation for the construction of a new modern airport terminal building in Tobago is well advanced. Construction work is scheduled to commence in December 2019, with completion expected in early 2021. Caribbean Airlines in 2018 provided 1,053,910 seats to and from Tobago, with usage of 86%, or 962,302 seats. In the first 3 months of 2019, CALAS provided 250,071 seats, with utilization of 223,991 seats, or 90%. Caribbean Airlines under this government has moved from perennial loss-making to sustainable profitability. In mid-2020, the arrangements on the Sea Bridge would be further upgraded and rationalized with the arrival of 2 brand new state-of-the-art fast ferries, now under construction for Trinidad and Tobago by Ostal Ships Party Limited and Incat Tasmania Limited. In the interim, a modern fast ferry has been leased for a one-year period and will arrive shortly. In the very near future, approval will be granted to the Tobago House of Assembly to raise loan financing on the local market in the sum of $300 million for a number of development projects in Tobago. Madam President, in the 3.5 years of our stewardship, we have repaired our fiscal accounts, appropriately addressed the collapse in government revenues, and returned the economy to growth, expected to be stabilized at approximately 2% annually by 2021. To give you updates on some major areas in the economy, starting with education, the government assistance for tuition expenses, GATE, a revolutionary program of the People's National Movement, although other people claim credit for this. It was as launched in 2004, and the Higher Education Loan Program, or HELP, together with free universal education at both the primary and secondary school levels, are generating a cadre of human resources to meet the requirements of our growing economy. In respect of health, our hospital development strategy will provide access to quality health care for our citizens throughout Trinidad and Tobago. The Arima Hospital is more than 75% completed. The Port of Spain Hospital is more than 60% completed. The proposed Sangre Grande Hospital and the reconstruction of the Port of Spain General Hospital Central Block are at early stages of commencement of work, while the delivery of healthcare at the Couva Hospital will commence shortly. In respect of housing, we are continuing in our quest to provide quality housing to address the high demand that exists for such houses. We are completing previously stalled projects with almost 1,000 units already delivered. We are also initiating new projects and providing safe and secure housing units for eligible citizens. Under the aided self-help housing program, 700 qualifying individuals are now preparing to construct their own homes on residential service lots developed by the Housing Development Corporation. Under the Housing and Village Improvement Programs, 57 houses are being constructed or reconstructed or improved in the first village identified for attention, which is Samuel Cooper Road in Moruga. And under the public-private partnership arrangement, 201 units are being constructed in Canupia, 72 units in Faizabad, 160 units in Mount Hope, 98 units in Terrestrial Arima, 58 units in Malabar Arima, 53 units in Corinth, 102 units in Harmony Hall Marabella, 86 units in Pro Village Moruga, 210 units in South Key Port of Spain, 65 units in Gomez Trace Moruga, and 504 units in Curep. The involvement of the private sector is being consolidated with the well-timed and commendable decision of Republic Bank to secure a US $75 million loan from the International Finance Corporation, the private sector arm of the World Bank Group, to assist in home construction, especially for middle-income households. We are ensuring that our housing construction program, including the public-private partnership arrangement, is put on a self-sustaining basis, given our objective to complete 6,000 units by 2020 and to roll out 3,000 units per annum thereafter. The proceeds of our first issue of housing bonds at the attractive rate of 4.5% per annum over 5 years, due within the next 2 will be utilized to immediately accelerate the housing construction program, with the proceeds from mortgages issued by the TTMF being utilized to finance on an ongoing basis development and sale of houses. Our mid-year outturn, Madam President. Madam President, for the 6-month period ending March 2019, revenue was $706 million above the projected revenue estimated in the context of the budgeted $47.724 billion. Conversely, expenditure in the first half of 2019 was $2,557 million below the programmed expenditure estimated in the context of the budgeted $51.776 billion. The 2019 budget had estimated a fiscal deficit of $4.052 billion for the year. For the 6-month period ending March 2019, a deficit of $5.114 billion was projected, but an amount of $1.851 billion was actually realized. Madam President, this represents a solidification of the economic stabilization program we have embarked upon since assuming office and has provided a platform for us to launch continued economic growth and development. In respect of our revenue, the increase in government's revenue by $706 million in the first half of 2019 was mainly due to higher than anticipated receipts from taxes on income of $197 million, taxes on international trade of $28 million, non-tax revenue of $105 million, and capital revenue of $926 million. These increases were partly offset by lower than anticipated receipts from taxes on goods and services. Madam President, the higher than projected performance of taxes on income and profits was primarily due to the higher receipts of $452.7 million from companies consequent on the increased rate of corporation tax on commercial banks, but the lower than projected receipts of $3.5 million from oil companies reduced the performance of companies in general. Non-tax revenue performed above expectations due in the main to equity profits from the central bank and profits of state enterprises. Capital revenue was also higher than expected due in the main to a number of transactions related to the repayment of debt to the government of Trinidad and Tobago by CLICO. Recurrent expenditure, Madam President, recorded outturns lower than the anticipated $23.6 billion, with declines in goods and services and interest payments amounting to $1.474 billion. Madam President, we intend to direct resources into areas that support not only the private sector in its business activity, but also in enhancing growth and development. We are focusing on infrastructural rollout, including roads, highways, bridges, and hospitals. We are also propose to focus on, with this adjustment, discharging arrears to commercial suppliers and contractors, as well as liquidating VAT refunds, and thereafter putting such refunds on a current basis, with a view to improving the business conditions of our suppliers and VAT registrants in order that they can take advantage of emerging opportunities. Madam President, to drive the economy in the areas of infrastructure, as well as to build our capital relations with the commercial sector on a current basis, total expenditure has been revised upwards to $52.078 billion, an increase of approximately $302 million over the budgeted figure for 2019. On the other hand, total revenue, which was budgeted at $47.724 billion, is projected to fall by $729 million to $47.003 billion, with a resultant overall deficit of $5.05 billion compared to the $4.052 billion that was budgeted. In light of weakening oil prices, the oil price assumption as obtained in the 2019 budget statement will be lowered to $60 per barrel of oil, but with gas prices averaging $3.26 per MMBTU over the period October 2018 to April 2019, the gas price assumption has been revised upwards to US $3 per MMBTU from $2.75 as obtained in the 2019 budget. Madam President, as I stated earlier, the supplementary appropriation of $1,839,189,300 is required to cover liabilities on hand and to meet expenditure to the end of the fiscal year, and affects 18 heads of expenditure as detailed hereunder. The judiciary, $57,682,800. Service commissions, $3 million. Office of the Prime Minister, $12 million. Personnel Department, $2 million. Ministry of Finance, $729,187,071. Pensions and gratuities, $18 million. Ministry of National Security, $207 million. Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, $50 million. Ministry of Education, $50 million. Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprise Development, $39,258,000. Ministry of Public Utilities, $200,000. Ministry of Rural...
Minister, you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, $39 million. Ministry of Works and Transport, $65,512,929. Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, $48 million. Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, $75 million. Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, $6 million. Ministry of Communication, $10 million. And Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, $227,548,500. Madam President, honourable senators are asked to be cognizant of the fact that the majority of the supplementary appropriation is in respect of current transfers and subsidies and represents claims on hand and projected liabilities to the end of the fiscal year which cannot be avoided. Madam President, I wish at this time to assure the honourable senators and the general public that this administration will continue to manage the country's financial resources in 2019 and beyond in a prudent manner, thereby ensuring that the additional financial resources will be utilised in the most efficient manner. Madam President, I now wish to commend to the Senate the Finance Supplementary Appropriation Financial Year 2019, Bill 2019. The object of this bill is to supplement the appropriation provided for by the Appropriation Financial Year 2019 Act No. 16 of 2018 by authorizing the issue from the Consolidated Fund in the sum of $1,839,189,300. Madam President, I would like to end with a quote from the esteemed South African President Nelson Mandela, who said, "After climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb." Madam President, this PNM government will continue to build upon the successes we have achieved to date in every facet of our efforts. We will continue to climb that hill, and we will persevere for the benefit of all citizens of our beloved country of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam President, I thank you and I beg to move.
Honourable Senators, I shall now propose the question for debate. The question is that a bill entitled "An Act to Supplement the Appropriation of the Sum the Issue of which was authorized by the Appropriation Financial Year 2019 Act 2018, Act No. 16 of 2018, be now read a second time." Senator Mark.
Thank you, Madam President, I'm pleased to join this debate on another ritual that we have grown accustomed to experiencing in this House. It is an act to supplement the appropriation of the sum, the issue of which was authorized by the Appropriation Financial Year 2019 Bill 2018. Madam President, we are not impressed with the Minister in the Ministry of Finance statement. It's the same old, same old. And Madam President, we will demonstrate that the Minister stayed very clear from indicating to this Parliament what was the likely projected growth for 2018 and, of course, 2019. We went into 2021. Madam President, it is a fallacy for any government to assume any turnaround, as they are claiming, of an economy, of this economy, merely on the basis of a meager increase in the country's GDP. The World Bank has offered a 0.7% increase for 2018. But, Madam President, the truth is that the economy is still experiencing some very serious level of macroeconomic instability. And this is manifested in growing fiscal deficits, increasing primary imbalances, particularly on our current accounts, declining foreign exchange reserves, rising levels of public sector debt, including the foreign debt component, increasing levels of unemployment, Madam President, combined with growing underemployment. And therefore, the premise of the government that the economy is growing or has grown is really a figment of their imagination, because the macroeconomic indicators which are present and I've outlined are all heading towards the south. And therefore, it is a colossal fallacy for the government to assume or to try to fool the nation that there's some turnaround. I think the government has turned its back on the population. And, Madam President, we can see this when we look at what is happening to business in our country. Business is losing hope in this land. You have UE and UTT graduates by the hundreds, Madam President, who cannot find employment. They are engaged in underemployment activities. Low and semi-skilled workers are desperately in search of employment. The confidence of consumers has collapsed. They boast about 1% inflation, but you must have 1% because nobody's buying anything. The people are not buying. So your inflation rate must be low. And, Madam President, families are struggling to make two ends meet under this useless and incompetent P&M administration. Madam President, if the truth be told, the government under this P&M regime has crushed the economy. They have crushed the economy. People have lost confidence in this government. Madam President, there is closure of several businesses in our country. There is mass and rising unemployment in our country. Madam President, would you believe that this country, this government, has received collectively more revenue than the People's Partnership during the first 3 years? They have received more revenues. In fact, we have estimated, Mr. Vice President, that they have received more than $5.5 billion more in their first 3 years than the PP. But you know what? You know what, Mr. Vice President? The PNM has continued to erode business confidence, investor confidence in our country. And their policies are inimical to meaningful economic and financial growth. I want to remind you, Mr. Vice President, according to the Auditor General, this PNM spent $57 billion in expenditure in 2016, $55 billion in 2017, $54 billion in 2018. And they're going fast along a road of $57 billion if you take what they're proposing today at the end of 2019. And the figures are there in the Auditor General's report, Madam President, Mr. Vice President. So this PNM government has spent over $223 billion in the last 3.5 years to 4 years, Madam President. And they have not done, they have nothing to show for it. That, Mr. Vice President, it is almost equivalent to $172,000 for every single man, woman, and child. So, Madam President, Mr. Vice President, rather, where's this money going? It is going to the friends, family, and financiers of the PNM. That is where the money is going. In the government, we have agents of big business, promoting big business interests. Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, 40,000 citizens we have estimated. This government, through the CSO, has not produced any unemployment figures since the last quarter of 2017. Since the last quarter of 2017, no figures have been produced. We have estimated between 40 to 50,000 citizens have lost their jobs in this country. Madam President, Mr. Vice President, under this government, half of the country cannot even receive water. They can't even supply water to the nation. The Minister of Public Utilities is a complete failure. Mr. Vice President, there is no access to foreign exchange for small and medium-sized businesses in this country. You have thousands of workers who have lost their jobs because of PNM insensitive and incompetent policies in terms of economic policies. And those workers are unable to service their mortgages. They are about to lose their homes, many of them. The country's GDP has collapsed under the weight of PNM incompetence, Mr. Vice President. You only have to look at the annual report of the central bank to see where there was a violent contraction in our economy in 2016 under this government. Mr. Vice President, would you believe that even under the Minister of Trade, the manufacturing sector has contracted and their capacity at this time is about 66.4%. That is what is taking place. It is the lowest since 2014, Mr. Vice President. That is the experience that people have under this government. So the manufacturing sector is unable to expand their operation. They have spare capacity in this country. And therefore, the economic experience of the vast majority of working people is one of stress, distress, and growing anxiety. The psychological state of the working class is one of fear, insecurity, and uncertainty. And among the middle class, it is impending financial disaster as many become extremely challenged to satisfy and honor their mortgage payments. All these developments are taking place, Mr. Vice President, in the context of continued recklessness on the part of this government, wastage, corruption, and massive mismanagement of the country's finances and the economy. Mr. Vice President, the economy contracted between 2016 to 2018 by 6.5%, the sharpest contraction in more than 3 decades. Mr. Vice President, our economy under this regime is 10% smaller than it was 4 years ago. The non-energy sector is languishing. Every sector is contracting, whether it be agriculture, construction, and others, Mr. Vice President. This government has not been able to bring to this country any new foreign direct investment flows since it came to office. In fact, there has been a net outflow of foreign investment, Mr. Vice President. So the question here is that the PNM has not been able to bring about any meaningful turnaround as they claim. What they have done is to impose a series or plethora of regressive taxes on our citizens. Mr. Vice President, you recall that they, in fact, removed VAT, and in fact, they introduced VAT on 12,000 food items. Citizens must never forget this. They introduced, Madam President, the controversial property tax. The PNM was defeated on that. In 2010, they reintroduced it. Mr. Vice President, higher corporate taxes on business and banks, online taxes, they have continued this. Mr. Vice President, so when we look at the reality of TNT today, Trinidad and Tobago is under severe stress under this PNM. Every area, Mr. Vice President, you can think about. When we look at the balance of payments, Trinidad and Tobago external accounts, according to the Central Bank latest annual survey, recorded a deficit of $904.5 million, which is about 5.1% of GDP during the first 9 months of 2018. Mr. Vice President, this is what is going on here. Our gross foreign exchange reserves is down to $7.3 billion, less than 7 months of import cover. As we are told, and the Sunny Minister said 8 months. Mr. Vice President, we are not going to get involved in any statistical tug-of-war with this government. They are bullying their way in many respects in different parts of the world. We await what the IMF will say at the end of July as it relates to the latest data that they are being called upon to supply to the IMF. But, Mr. Vice President, when we look at the hard data that is before us, the labor force participation rate, according to the Central Bank, has been down at the end of 2017 to 58.3%. Mr. Vice President, this is a state of affair in our country. You have close to 368,000 citizens between 15 and over 65 who can work, who are willing to work, Mr. Vice President, but the government has not been able to put them to work. Many people have lost their jobs in the construction sector. Over 12,000 fewer workers are employed in that sector today. According to the central bank, job losses occurred in the energy sector, 3.9 thousand. In the community, social, and personal services sector, 2.7 thousand jobs lost. In the transport, storage, and communication sector, 1,900. And losses at TSTT, 709 workers have been sent home. We understand the judiciary is planning to send home about 600 workers in a restructuring exercise that is taking place. That is what we are being told. Information coming out from the Public Services Association is saying that the judiciary plans to put 600 workers on the breadline through a restructuring exercise. You going to talk to the PSA about that? Mr. Vice President, as I said, they have sent home close to 9,000 workers at Petrotrin. That is what this government has done. And therefore, the government has betrayed the working people of our country. They have betrayed our people, Mr. Vice President. So when we look at the figures, Mr. Vice President, we realize that the government is not really generating new revenues, any new revenues, Mr. Vice President. I want to ask the Honorable Minister, because the Honorable Minister made reference to housing and something called the Village and Housing Program. Mr. Vice President, I want to ask the government pointedly whether they are using public money, taxpayers' money, to build houses identified by parliamentarians in marginal constituencies so that they can vote apart and house part, and whether that is not equivalent to misbehavior in public office. Mr. Vice President, we are allocating $18 million towards some village program, housing development program. But the minister was very careful in not dealing with it. But Mr. Vice President, I will deal with it. We will deal with it. What this government has been doing over the last 2 to 3 years, they have targeted 4 marginal constituencies. Maruga Tableland, the constituency of St. Joseph, Toco Sandy Grande, and San Fernando West. And you know what they are doing, Mr. Vice President? In the case of Maruga and San Fernando West, they conducted a social survey. And after conducting the social survey, they spoke to the Member of Parliament, and the Member of Parliament was able to identify needy people in those constituencies. I'm talking about 2 PNM constituencies, using public money in 2 PNM constituencies. You know what they are now doing, Mr. Vice President? They have gone a step further. No more social surveys. They're going directly to the Member of Parliament in St. Joseph and the Member of Parliament in Toco Sandy Grande. And they are asking them to identify needy people so that they can construct homes in the marginal constituencies for PNM supporters. It is criminal. It is misbehavior in public office. And this is a matter that you will hear more from us on, Mr. Vice President. This cannot be fair. You are dealing with all of our money. I pay taxes. Every citizen pays taxes. You refuse to build houses in Naparima. You refuse to go and give support in places like Princess Town. But where are you using taxpayers' money? 18 million in 4 PNM marginal constituencies. Mr. Vice President, that is not right. And we must expose the PNM for what they are doing. They are using taxpayers' money in order to voter pad and to house pad in four marginal constituencies.
As much as you were talking about building houses in whatever constituencies and what is happening with MPs, what you're saying about voter padding is imputing improper motives, and I would ask you to refrain from going down that line.
Mr. Vice President, I call on the Minister of Housing. I call on the government to dispute what I am saying. I am not imputing any improper motive, Mr. Vice President. I am giving you facts that the PNM government, I'm not calling any individual, the PNM government is using our taxpayers' money to target marginal constituencies. That is the point I'm making. Help what citizen you identifying PNM supporters?
Senator Mark, just the pointing and shouting across the floor.
Sorry,
please, just temper a little bit.
I'll just temper, sir. But you see, I don't like advantage. I don't like injustice. Yes, I understand, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I would like the Honorable Minister to tell this Parliament, how were these constituencies selected? How were they identified, Mr. Vice President? This is not fair, Mr. Vice President. They need to come clean and tell us what is going on in that area, Mr. Vice President. It is not fair. Mr. Vice President, that is an area that we have a lot of information on, and we have more to say on that. But I would suffice it to say at this time, we will not go further on this matter. I wanted to say that we are in support of giving Tobago the right to come on the market to raise money. But I want to tell you something. We want proper accountability in Tobago. Too many misappropriations, too many unaudited accounts. Since 2007, the last audited report from the Auditor General, after spending billions of dollars, is 2007. And you want to go and give the THA the power to go and raise money, and you have no systems of proper accountability in Tobago? Let us say accountability, and then you give them the power to raise money on the market. That is what I would like to say on this matter of the giving Tobago the power to raise funds, Mr. Vice President, on the open market. Mr. Vice President, there are some areas I would like the Honorable Minister to provide some clarity as we go along. I would like, Mr. Vice President, for the Honorable Minister to tell us what is happening with the whole question of this Train 1. I would hope the Minister of Finance would find the time today to share with us what is the position of the government on this idea of Train 1. We know that there's a pending closure and mudballing of Train 1. And I would like clarity on this matter. We would like to know if it is going to create unemployment in Point Fortin. We'd like to know what will happen to the small contractors and service providers if you have no gas going to Train 1, according to BPTT. Up to this morning on television, Mr. Vice President, BPTT is telling the whole world no gas in 2020 and 2021. We are saying, let us know what is going to happen, whether there will be a negative impact, Mr. Vice President, on the jobs and the economic activity in that part of the country. We also would like to know there has been a major economic fallout from the closure of Petrotrin, and the negative consequences, is being felt by thousands of workers who have been affected, and especially contractors in South Trinidad. what is taking place, Madam President, is a pattern of what I call deindustrialization of our country. It started under the PNM with the closure of ArcelorMittal in 2016, followed by 2 methanol plants in 2017. Then they closed down the refinery in 2018. Now we are hearing about Train 1 not being able to function in 2020. We need to know what is going on. There has been no drilling in Trinma for over 3 years. And Trinma is based in Point 410. Tell us what is going on, Madam President. The government, Madam President, when they shut down Petrotrin, they never told the country that they will be taking out, according to the minister, over $700 million from the IDF to fund settlement packages for workers of Petrotrin. Today, we are being asked to approve that. But at the time, they didn't tell us they were doing that, Madam President. Could the minister explain to us, that is the Minister of Energy, what about the US $850 million US bullet payment due in 2009? In 2019, rather, August, in 3 months' time, rather. We have heard nothing about that. What is the status of the refinancing of this bond, along with the other 2007 bond? So we need to get some answers. Madam President, the closure of Petrotrin has left a cloud of economic and mental depression in the south of Trinidad. The closure of Petrotrin was executed and engineered by what I call the economic elite that have no connection whatsoever with South Trinidad or with the working people of South Trinidad. That is what has happened, Madam Vice President. As on the matter of energy, Madam President, I would like the Honorable Minister to explain to this country why did he, as the Minister of Energy, in a paid advertisement in the Express, Monday the 13th of May, 2019, why did the minister revoke an order for shallow water competitive bidding? And he made a number of changes, including the question about the weights. For example, in 5 of this article that I have here on page 47 of the Express of Monday the 13th of May 2019, and I quote, Schedule 6 to the order is amended in the first table under the heading A, points per unit, by deleting the words 10 and 0.26 per km square and substituting the words 5 and 0.017 per km square, respectively. Maximum points by deleting the words 10 and 15 and substituting the words 5 and 10, respectively. It is signed by F.A. Khan, Minister of Energy. Minister of Energy, through the Honorable President, kindly explain this sudden and inexplicable revocation of an order that was issued by the ministry under your pen. And then this bid, Madam President, as I understand it, closes on May the 20th. And the minister on the 13th of May revoked certain commitments that were given in a previous order. Let us know what is behind this, because we are doing our research on this one. And we want the minister to come clean on this matter. Madam President, we know that our country is under a lot of stress as a result of PNM. the only people who are benefiting from the P&M policies, Madam President, are the bankers. My friend who was a former Republic Bank manager would know this. The bankers are benefiting. That is why, for instance, the Minister of Finance could boast that these are the people who are benefiting. Republic Bank, as an example, they are benefiting. But Madam President, I would like the minister to tell this country how a non-existent fly-by-night organization was able in less than 4 years to increase its asset base from $115 million to $350 million. This is something that we want to get clear up, because this is an institution that was born in 2012, 2013. And Madam President, in no time, their asset base went from $115 million. I'm telling you, Madam President, the people who are benefiting from the government's economic policy, it is not the squatters, it is not the security guards, it is not the ordinary people who are benefiting. It is a clique, an economic elite that is benefiting. And we are seeing it here. So they moved from 115 to 350 million in less than 3 years, Madam President. I would say 4 years. Their customer deposit base was 71 million. Madam President, by the end of 2017, it went up to 268 million. How come? We need an explanation from the government. Why this little company, Fly By Night, was able to reach that kind of base. And you know what is nice, Madam President? Shareholder equity. It started at 82 in 2014. 82 million, eh? And you know, by the end of 2017, it's the same 82 million. They're making no injection in terms of capital or shareholder equity. They're taken from the state. You know where they're taken from? Tringen. They're taken from NIB. They're taken from the Home Mortgage Bank. They're taken from UDCOT, Madam President. And I want answers. This is something. No, you need to answer this. The government needs to answer this. This is a serious matter. The government maybe is not aware. But, Madam President, the government maybe is not aware. But they are using taxpayers' money in order to promote private interests. And we need answers. So we call on the government today to tell us what is happening with this almost non-existent organization, this fly-by-night organization called NCB Global Finance. We want to know what is going on with NCB Global Finance. Well, whatever incarnation it was, I'm saying in 2013, it was born, NCB Global Finance. Madam President, I would like to tell this Honorable Senate that the boss man of this company is a gentleman from Jamaica who lives in Canada and who has just taken over Guardian Holdings Limited. I don't have to call names because you wouldn't want me to do that at this time. I call the names. What I can say, Madam President, is when I look at the directors of NCB Global Finance, I've seen some names here that have me cringing. And I want to know, Madam President.
You have 5 more minutes.
Yes. Madam President, I would like to know whether the government knows about this. And the Prime Minister needs to tell us, why did he, Madam President, take UDCOT under his wings on the 14th, and on the 15th, a loan amounting to $180 million was signed between UDCOT and this company called NCB Global Finance. We want answers. Is it accidental? And there is a brother of a senior government minister who is not only the CEO, but he is also a director on the board of directors of NCB Global Finance. So, Madam President, I would like this government to look at this question. And, Madam President, the minister is boasting about suppression of expenditure and how much is saved and how much is saved, Madam President. Madam President, I want to bring to your attention in closing that there are workers in the teaching profession. They are called school supervisors. They have not been paid since September. In fact, from 2017 to the present time, they have not been paid their motor vehicle upkeep and traveling allowances, and they cannot visit schools. So while the minister is boasting that they are saving on expenditure, they are not saving, Madam President. They are suppressing and they are not paying. We call on the government to pay the school supervisors their traveling allowances. They have not been paid since September of 2017. Why are you not paying them their monies, Madam President? So we call on the government to take action in that regard. Madam President, I want to tell this government, in closing, I've looked at Section 3 of the Exchequer and Audit Act, and the government is acting unlawfully and illegally by varying $20 million from one head, Ministry of Works and Transport, and transferring it to the Ministry of Finance and not coming here for approval. It is illegal, it is unlawful, it is contrary to the Exchequer and Audit Act. And I call on the minister in the Ministry of Finance to pay attention to this matter. Madam President, I want to say in closing that, we have the government of this country through its leader always talking about wanting to bolt things to people's chests. I want to say in closing that I want to seal and bolt to the Prime Minister's chest a number of matters that we want answers and the people want answers. They want answers on the sellout of Petrotrin. They want answers on the sellout of this AV Drilling, who stole $100 million. They want answers on the inexplicable transfer of $180 million by NCB Global Finance to UDCOT. They want answers on the scandal surrounding the acquisition of several ferries on the Sea Bridge. They want the government to answer on the 1,660 citizens who have been murdered in the last 3.5 years. They want the government to answer why they have failed to proclaim the Public Procurement Act, while a lot of contracts have been awarded. They want the government to indicate why they have closed and presided over the closure of several important institutions in this country. And, Madam President, they want the government to account for some 50,000 jobless citizens. And these are just a few of the areas we want the government to bolt to their chest. We want it to bolt these things to their chest because we intend to fasten them tightly onto your chest so that when we go out and we're campaigning, you are going to take responsibility for all of these activities against the ordinary people of this country. Madam President, I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to dispose of this waste called the mid-year review. Thank you very much.
Senator Deonarine.
Thank you, Madam President, for the opportunity to contribute to this debate today. Before I commence my presentation, I would like to first of all indicate the sources of data that I would have used to prepare my presentation. Up front, I would like to do this. I would have used the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, the Central Statistical Office database, and also over several years, the public accounts, the Attorney General's review on the public accounts of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, I would have used other sources of information, but I will refer to them throughout the course of my presentation. Now, I would like to start my contribution today by saying that today's fiscal policy determines tomorrow's debt burden. And the challenging economic times that this country tends to face every time we experience a significant negative shock to the energy prices, these economic challenges will continue to exist as long as we continue to engage in what we call pro-cyclical fiscal policy. Madam President, during energy booms, what we tend to have is that energy prices are buoyant, the treasury is plump, and it is difficult for governments to exercise some sort of fiscal discipline to restrict public expenditure. Governments are usually politically inclined to increase recurrent expenditure and reduce taxation and pay little attention to the source of growth of revenue, exercise control over the expansion of this government expenditure, and exercise little control over addressing the extent to which the government participation in the economy is being expanded. So when the prices of energy, when energy prices crash, or in local parlance we say when the mark busts, we are basically left with a situation where the source of growth remains the same. Government has little flexibility or wiggle room to reduce expenditure, and the size of government involvement or the role of the government in the state becomes large. This is what the Trinidad and Tobago economy has been subjected to, not just today, not yesterday, not 5 years ago, but since its independence. Now, although we have experienced 3 quarters of positive economic growth in 2018, I want to remind the Honorable Minister that for us to continue on this path of fiscal consolidation, in order for us to do this effectively, we need to keep a watchful eye on the stock of debt. We shouldn't get too excited just yet, because the move to acquire more debt and adopt an expansionary approach would mean that we are basically proceeding again along that path of pro-cyclical fiscal policy. Now, before I get into the bulk of the supplementation of appropriation, I would like to briefly comment on some of the broader measures outlined by the Honorable Minister during piloting of the Act. The first thing I would like to receive some sort of clarification from is in terms of the revision of the natural gas price, the budgeted price of natural gas. Now, I see that the price was revised upwards from US $2.75 per MMBTU to US $3 per MMBTU. And I understand that we are going to have an expansion in the natural gas production. However, I would really like if the Honorable Minister of Energy would clarify for me whether the EIA publication in their short-term energy outlook forecasted price for natural gas was revised to $2.79 for 2019. So whether this forecast in the US has any sort of impact for us here in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, the second thing I want to move on to say is that there basically has been through this supplementation, there has been a widening of the fiscal deficit of $300 million, from $4.05 billion to $4.57 billion. Now, we are in our 9th consecutive year of a fiscal deficit, and more importantly, we are in the 4th consecutive year of a primary deficit. What this means to say, Madam President, is that even before we think about paying out our interest on our loans, we are already in debt. So essentially, what we are doing is that we are basically borrowing in order to repay our debts. The latest announcement by the Honorable Minister on loan financing through housing bonds at a value of $1 billion and $300 million for development projects in Tobago would add to this increase in stock of debt. While I agree that the capital investment and the investment in the housing market is could very well promote economic expansion through growth in the construction sector, the problem is that the means by which this is being financed. Since 2014, our net public sector debt have crossed the 55 to 56% debt benchmark. Now, I use this benchmark because it is a benchmark that was established by the IMF in their publication called Threshold Effects of Sovereign Debt, Evidence from the Caribbean, 2012, by Greenidge, Craigwell, Thomas, and Drakes. And according to this publication, the IMF is saying that every dollar of fiscal spending beyond this threshold financed by debt has a negative impact on economic growth. Debt beyond this point usually tends to discourage investment in the country, as investors tend to feel that their profits are being taxed away or will be taxed away. Domestic and external debt has increased by 85% and 24% respectively since 2014. Now, I'm using 2014 as my reference period because 2014 was when the energy prices would have crashed. And what is concerning to me, Madam President, is that external debt, the rate at which the external debt is growing is a big concern because of the tight foreign exchange conditions that currently exist. Because foreign debt has to be repaid in US dollars, both the interest and principal payments. The Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago also has to intervene in the foreign exchange market and support the foreign exchange market to maintain any sort of equilibrium in the supply and demand of foreign exchange so that we can maintain that managed float that we have with the US dollar. In 2018, for example, $1.5 billion was injected into foreign exchange market by the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago. In 2018, we recorded a net financial outflow in our capital account of $550 million. Our food import bill is still very high. We are reliant on food imports. And all these factors, Madam President, has been placing increasing pressures on the reserves of the country. While our reserve stands at $7.6 billion, can be perceived as relatively healthy according to international benchmarks, the rate at which it has been declining is at 10% over the past, it has been declining at 10% per annum since 2014. Between 2014 and 2018, there was a 25% decline. And in 2014, we would have been benefiting from a large extent of in the first half of 2014, we would have been benefiting from energy reserves, from energy exports. However, at this point in time, the rate at which the reserves in the central bank is depleting is worrying because the rate at which it is being replenished is not the same. Now, Madam President, I could go on a little more on about the overdraft, about the debt, but I wouldn't persist on the topic. I would move on to the supplemental appropriation presented in the bill, and the supplemental appropriation basically focuses on recurrent expenditure. We have 96% of the supplementation of the $1.839 billion that will go towards wages and salaries, goods and services, minor equipment purchases, current transfers and subsidies, and transfers to state enterprises and statutory bodies. A mere 4% will go towards the capital expenditure. Although evident that the government has been exercising some sort of fiscal restraint since 2014, where the largest decline was in fiscal 2015-2016, expenditure did actually rise by 7%, did rise at 7% in fiscal year 2018-2019. There has been a redistribution of expenditure to primarily recurrent expenditure, 93% of total expenditure. Historically, Trinidad and Tobago, we have had a large recurrent expenditure bill, above 80% of total expenditure, and this is primarily because of what I discussed earlier, that we tend to engage in a lot of pro-cyclical fiscal policy when energy prices are buoyant. Now, according to the Standard Finance Committee report, the second report, the supplementation that are being requested is to finance a lot of outstanding bills. Based on my calculations, and I stand corrected, over $500 million of this supplementation will go towards financing outstanding payments, bills. And I would just like to say that although I understand that we have been having some fiscal challenges, when persons are owed, there tends to be a delay in injections in the circular flow of income. And when there's a delay in the injection of money in the circular flow of income, there tends to be a decline in aggregate demand, and there is a decline in consumption and investment in the economy. And then the other thing is that delayed injections tend to temper with the confidence of the citizens of the country or the receivers of these payments. And they tend to adapt to a sort of pattern of being accustomed with operating with a lower level of income. This usually promotes a tendency for them to increase their propensity to save, reduce their propensity to consume, and also reduce the level of investment that they have, that they would like to invest in the economy. And this tends to impact on inflation. And maybe this is why our inflation rate has been so low, because it's a ripple effect. Business confidence is low, and then the size of the government is also controlling that set of controlling the size of the government is fairly large, and the government is the largest employer and the largest purchaser of goods and services, and of course the largest supplier of social welfare. Now, I want to move towards the replenishment of the infrastructure development vote with $709 million that was transferred to facilitate the exit cost of Petroshin. Now, I understand this is raising many questions, and I agree, yes, it would have been used to finance infrastructure projects in the form of infrastructure works, much needed road works that would have generated quite a bit of employment and boost construction. Perhaps the government was faced with a situation where resources were immediately needed to be allocated for the short term, in order to facilitate this exit course to ensure that the livelihoods of the persons who were being laid off was maintained. However, however, I would assume this would mean that infrastructure works would have been delayed at a later time, or would have been planned to be started at a later date, maybe in 2019 as opposed to 2018. If this assumption is correct, I question then which projects were the ones that were foregone. Were they scheduled to start in 2018? And if yes, were additional costs incurred due to the delays? Were there any cost overruns? Do we anticipate any cost overruns? Now, I move towards the land distribution program to ex-Petrotrin workers. And I would like to commend this move. And I would like to commend the move to grant access to the agricultural sites for ex-Petrotrin workers. Because even though the agriculture sector contributes to only 0.5% of GDP, accounts for 4% of employment, the fact remains that we have a very large food import bill, and having professionals such as those professionals from Petrotrin and other fields coming into the agricultural sector could basically stimulate some sort of innovation and technological advancement in non-farming practices in the country. And this could basically increase yield because it increases productivity in the agricultural sector, and can even create some sort of competitive advantage in the sector, and maybe eventually allow us to earn some sort of foreign exchange. Madam President, I would like to go on to the the allocation of 39.25 million to the OJT program under the Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprises. Now, I understand this supplementation will be hiring 1,600 young professionals all across the 5 categories of the OJT program. And I assume that more of these recruits would go to levels 1 and 5. In light of the increase of job losses in the country, my question is how this OJT program is currently evaluating the absorption of young graduates to the workforce after the 2 years training program. What percentage are being reabsorbed into the labor force? Or is it that after the 2 years training, they just sit at home and wait for some sort of other employment? Or is it that they are immediately reabsorbed into the labor force? While I understand fiscal restraint continues, the labor market will experience some adverse effects and will continue to experience some adverse effects. And the question is whether we are being proactive in identifying structural challenges that face the labor market. How are we ensuring that placements are in line with trainees' qualifications and providers' needs? According to a survey done by the Inter-American Development Bank in 2014, the name of this survey was the Production, Technology, and Innovation Survey. It identified that skills mismatches in Trinidad and Tobago do exist in the labor market. And skills mismatches in the labor force can lead to significant consequences in labor productivity. So I would recommend that the Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprises and the Ministry of Education sit down and really collaborate to ensure that this skills gap is narrowed. Madam President, on the issue of procurement, I understand that the Office of the Procurement Regulator is 95% staffed, and the team is working assiduously to complete a handbook and guidelines to facilitate transition by the various ministries. Now, I question the transition strategy here because I know that there's a 6-month transition period in line, and I am not sure whether a 3-day workshop and the guidelines and handbooks would be sufficient to facilitate an effective transition in something of this magnitude. Madam President, I move on to the efficiency of public expenditure. And before I conclude, I want to say that public expenditure needs to be reduced and contained, and we need to contain the debt. Much structural changes are needed to realign public expenditure. We need to ensure efficiency, and we need to reduce the level of wastage. When looking at the Auditor General report for 2018, there are severe gaps in monitoring and evaluation, the timeliness of providing documents, the timeliness of providing records, the timeliness of recording payments, gaps in recording payments. And many may argue that until we can ensure efficiency in public expenditure, we should basically save or just take the money and put it in our in the HSF. Now, according to an IMF study in 2012, the efficiency of Trinidad and Tobago's public investment spending was estimated to be 27.5%. And based on this study, Madam President, the name of the study is Fiscal Rules for Resource Windfalls Allocation, the case of Trinidad and Tobago, 2012. And because of this revelation that 27.5% of public spending is efficient, only 27.5% of public spending is efficient, their conclusion was that we should probably move towards move towards saving and boosting our sovereign wealth fund. Now, I understand that the government has been undertaking several interventions to review the public expenditure, the way in which public expenditure takes place in the country. And I am familiar with the World Bank Public Expenditure Review, the Regulated Industries Commission rate determination exercise, also a technical assistance to enhance public investment. I would humbly request that the Honorable Minister provide us with some sort of update or status, and also let us know the timelines on these interventions. Now, although I know restructuring public debt is a painful exercise and a painful process, it can indeed reduce the level of debt. It will help us to, what it will basically do is it will help us to reduce the pressure on the foreign exchange reserves, and therefore reduce the pressure that we are receiving to devalue the currency. Now, I understand that we will not be devaluing the currency, but the foreign exchange market is behaving in such a way that it is creating pressures for a devaluation to take place. Because when we address the deficit through reducing public expenditure, increasing efficiency, and doing away with wastage, we are essentially reducing the deficit in the country and basically addressing the foreign exchange the declining foreign exchange reserves from another direction. So, Madam President, in conclusion, I would like to say that persistent fiscal deficits and primary deficit is a reality of the country. There is a growing debt stock, 62% of GDP, which I believe is unsustainable for reasons that I would have explained during the course of my contribution. And despite growth has been recorded, we must be mindful of engaging in expansionary fiscal policy through increasing debt. In undergoing fiscal consolidation, we need to be mindful of efficiency of our public expenditure profile, and be mindful that it will create buffers and make it easy for us to adjust fiscal policies in a timely manner to withstand fiscal shocks. I thank you, Madam President.
Minister of Trade and Industry.
Thank you, Madam President. And I'm pleased to be in this House and to be able to speak to this bill, which gives us a chance to speak to the performance of the government in the first six months of this fiscal year. So I start immediately and I go to my good friend, Senator Wade Mark. And Senator Wade Mark this time was all over the place. And really, I could not connect his presentation at all. He spoke about deindustrialization. Of course, he spoke about investor and business confidence, which I will address certainly. But a lot of what he talked about was old talk, and there were matters which were addressed in the House on Monday. And of course, just regurgitating of things already completed. But again, not any substance or direction as to where they what they can possibly proffer to enhance what the government is already doing in terms of growing the economy. Nothing like that. As a matter of fact, he seemed really mystified, and he spoke about a contraction in the economy in 2016. Completely ignoring what the Minister of Finance and the Minister in the Ministry of Finance would have said with regard to growth rates. And Senator Mark, the contraction in the economy really began under you in last quarter, in December 2014. So you should have been able to identify with what was happening. It was while you all were in government, and it was on account of the falling commodity prices. But you should have understood, because in stark comparison, you would have had some healthy periods, and those would have been periods of growth and periods where the country was earning revenue, top dollar oil at 140, peaking at 140, and so on. So you should have understood growth and expansion, because you should have left this country in a better place, but you didn't. But in terms of the decline and so on, you should have identified that it started under Yole. I will remember being in this House in January 2015, when the then political leader came to the House and spoke about the state of the economy. It was the beginning of the year, and so on, that we'd have to exercise thrift, etc., and bang, as we spoke of that, we just entered a period of spend, profligacy, just unending spend, understanding full well that we were in a period of contraction, and we had in fact entered the recessionary period under you. In 2014. Let me correct you. So here's when the turnaround began. From quarter 2 2017 to quarter 3 2017, we would have gone from a negative 5.6% to a negative 3.3%. Quarter 4 in 2017 to a negative 1.9%. Quarter 1 2018, growth of 0.9%. Quarter 2 2018, growth of 2.1%. Quarter 3 2018, growth of 1.5%. And those are central bank figures. Facts. And they're not going to go away. In fact, this country is growing very well. When I look at what is happening in the rest of the region, and let's say what's happening with Barbados, the kind of growth with Jamaica, I looked at Brazil, Bahamas, and so on, this country is doing well, having regard to what we had endured in the last few years. So in fact, this country has stabilized under the leadership of the Honourable Keith Rowley and the Minister of Finance, Minister Colum Imbert. And I want to, you're talking about bolted to the chest. I wanted to tell you that it's bolted to the chest of every citizen that we will never see the UNC in power again. Here on. And I want to emphasize, I know you thought, again, you tried very hard to speak very negatively. That's your ethos. That's how you operate. I want to tell you that under this government, this country will never be put into the hands of the IMF. Absolutely never. I give you that. And so I will not speak anymore about your poor leadership and governance during the period 2014 to 2015. In fact, I would extend it from the time you came into office in 2010 because despite the high oil prices and gas prices, there's nothing to show for it. But poor leadership under you, poor leadership. And let me move on to Senator, let me please move on to Senator Deonarine, and who recognized the big room that we had and where we have come. And I want to let her know that many of the issues that she has raised will be answered by my colleagues and certainly will not go unnoticed. So really, in beginning, I want to congratulate the Minister of Finance and the Minister in the Ministry of Finance this morning for her presentation, but again, for the outstanding record in stabilizing this economy and for setting this country on a path of growth. We are, and I want to tell you that all of us in here, together with all of our members in the lower house, are all ready and have been contributing and are prepared to contribute in a greater way towards the government's growth strategy. And my colleagues will speak to the question of agriculture and tourism and the other areas that we have, in particular, where we have growth plans. But I want, again, to make reference to the response of the business community to the presentation on the mid-year review, that by and large, the business community is in support of the government's fiscal management, and we couldn't be more pleased about that, because it's only with them that we can truly grow this economy to a very, very healthy standard where all of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago can, in fact, benefit. I make reference to EY's report, which came out on the night of the presentation by the Minister of Finance, and the heading says it all: indisputable recovery. And in it, the contents, I will not go into it, but of course the comments are that the Honourable Minister of Finance continued to espouse a positive tone during the presentation. The government's perception of Trinidad and Tobago's indisputable economic recovery was supported by the Honourable Minister's citation of various positive economic indicators and statistics. And again, in the presentation this morning by the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, we were able to bring to the public all of the positive aspects that we have achieved in the last few years since coming into office, and particularly in the last 6 months. But moving forward, and as a government with a vision, with a commitment, with a focus, we are the principal activity and trend throughout all of the ministries is on stimulating and growing the economy, ensuring prosperity for all. It is also, contrary to what you would imply and want to say, it is about building confidence in the business sector and also in the citizenry as well. And I'll tell you why I say the business sector. It is that government does not have the wherewithal to grow the country alone. And therefore, we need to unlock all of that private capital which is existing. Indeed, the Minister of Finance would have given statistics again on the increased level of access by the private sector to at the various lending institutions. He would have given data of the increase, which is at this stage about, I think, $58 billion or so Yes, 58 billion in 2018. And if that doesn't spell confidence, what does? So we need the private sector on board. Indeed, they are on board. I can tell you that the Ministry of Trade and Industry has engagements with all of the chambers right across this country, not only the principal chamber, but also the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association. Because the Manufacturers Association in particular, we are looking to for growth in the manufacturing sector. And I can tell you that they are all committed and on board with us, and the capital is available throughout the banking sector. And as I said, the important thing at this time is unlocking the capital and the cash that is available, and encouraging the private sector to join with us and into growing this economy. So in the Ministry of Trade and Industry, I want to speak on the trade aspect, and I want to speak principally to diversification after, because that's a principal area for non-energy growth. Although I know that Honourable Minister will speak about the energy sector, where there has been substantial growth, and which we will still continue to rely on for quite some time. But of course, the growth in that sector will have a considerable spin-off in the non-energy sector, coupled with all of the activities and areas of focus by the private sector, and of course the ministry, which has responsibility for non-energy, principally for non-energy matters. So when I was last here, and I'll spend just a little bit of time on it because I think it's so important, and I'm just quite disappointed in myself that the new trade policy is not yet available to the public, but we have completed the draft and it's going to Cabinet. It is going to Cabinet next week, and I can tell you that the deliberations and consultations were extensive, going back a second time to the TTMA, to the chambers, going back to the THA, and ensuring that we have a perfect document with us. And as I said before, it goes to Cabinet next week. But I can tell you that the pillars of the trade policy, I want to speak to it. And they are improving marginal product of labor through employment of highly skilled labor and modernized physical assets. And as I speak of modernized physical assets, I will later on in my presentation speak to the Phoenix Park Industrial Park, which will be on stream very soon. And another basic tenet of it, and is so very important, is increasing export market penetration by growing the share of existing markets, exploring new markets and profit opportunities, and upgrading trade diplomacy and regionalism. And I'm talking about the work of Export TT. And then again, institutional development, again, looking at our Export TT and other institutions that matter to trade, ensuring that these institutions are in fact strengthened. We are focusing on capacity. We must focus on capacity building. And of course, I can tell you in the case of CARICOM, we are creating this new institution, the Caribbean Business Council. This came out in the St. Anne's Declaration in the meeting which the heads of government had in Trinidad in December 2018. A new associate institution, I think, is contemplated. But again, it's the Caribbean Business Council, and that is, again, directed towards strengthening capacity right across the region, and Trinidad and Tobago is going to play a big part in that. But another tenet of the trade policy is improved trade facilitation by reducing the cost of doing business, increasing the efficiency of transport logistics and cargo handling, standardization of customs procedures, and upgrading of associated regular measures. And again, when I get to the SCW, and I will speak to the things that we are doing to improve business in the business environment. And also, as another basic tenet, is that of increasing environmental sustainability within the framework of the commitments under the Sustainable Development Goals. And there is the framework of the new trade policy, which should guide our work from 2019 to 2023. And I go straight into manufacturing, as I said. So we had seen Last year, when we spoke to the figures, we had seen the increase in the manufacturing sector in 2018, 32 billion, including in the petrochemical sector, but we spoke about the growth in other areas in terms of food and beverage and textiles and so on. But we've heard the commitment from the TTMA, and this is the incoming president, Franca Costello, that they are committed to grow exports by 50% over the next 5 years, and that is also matched by Export TT, and is also addressed in our new trade policy. So it's a thread, a consistent thread. That aligns through all of the relevant agencies and, of course, the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Again, the focus is on increasing our exports and reducing the country's import bill, and, of course, generating foreign exchange and providing sustainable employment. And I will speak to some numbers in terms of employment as well. So that coming out of the trade policy, there is, in fact, already prepared manufacturing sector policy and expansion plan, but I'm going to leave that for the launch of the particular plans. As we speak about manufacturing, it will be remiss of me if I did not speak about this country's relationship, and I know that the Minister of Foreign and Caricom Affairs would address it later on, but I will speak to it in the context of the Phoenix Park Industrial Park, which will begin which construction of which will begin shortly. You would know that this country has signed on or has become party by way of an MOU signed in May 15, 2018, between Trinidad and Tobago and the People's Republic of China, an MOU which is designed to further promote bilateral economic ties under the Belt and Road Initiative. Therein lies our commitment. And the overall initiative is one of a concept of economic growth. It's about boosting global trade and stimulating economic growth across Asia, but beyond that, and it's about enhancing economic ties, trade, finance, politics, communication, policies, and connectivity. We have seen the benefits, and as the Belt and Road Initiative begins to roll out, particularly as it relates to Trinidad and Tobago, the major firm which the Ministry of Trade has an interest in, and which will benefit all of the manufacturers in Trinidad and Tobago, and also provide the economic space for investors in manufacturing and other areas, is the Beijing Construction and Engineering Group, which we have signed on to, the construction by BCEG of this park. We spoke about it before. This is going to be a major project in the Belt and Road Initiative. As I said, will benefit us considerably. It's a US $104 million park. It's going to be a highly modernized park, and the update on that is that the commercial contract has been signed, and we are at the stage where we're about to finalize the loan agreement between the Ministry of Finance and the China Exim Bank, and execute the necessary framework between the government and the People's Republic of China. On this Friday, I actually meet with BECEG, which is a firm which will undertake the construction, to finalize details, and I can say as well that there's a 6-member delegation from the China Exim Bank, which is visiting Trinidad shortly, May 18th to 20th. Again, they would be visiting the site of the estate, and they will be meeting with the relevant government officials. So this is progressing quite well. There are going to be a number of lots that are sizable lots that are available, and as I said, it's exciting because its orientation is that of a modernized park, and I know that it's going to garner much interest even locally, particularly because of its location, which is just 5 minutes away from the port of Point Lisas. I want to say that InvestTT, understanding, of course, the work, understanding the progress of this park and the fact that it will be completed in 12 months and that there will be significant local and foreign interests. The InvestTT has already conducted a study examining how Trinidad and Tobago can in fact strengthen its ties with China through this Belt and Road Initiative, and so that in particular leveraging our location and all of the trade agreements which this country has already signed. This location is a gateway for Chinese investors into the north, the south, into Central America, and into the Caribbean markets as well, primarily in the areas of manufacturing and ICT. So coming out of that study, they in fact have about 18 leads which have been identified, again, predominantly in manufacturing and ICT sectors. And this is in addition to the 10 businesses that the BCEG has committed to bringing from China. So already I can attest to the fact that the development of this park will be highly successful, and I can see it stimulating the economy, particularly south of Trinidad and Tobago, and creating substantial jobs, not only in the construction stage, but immediately after. But as I speak about parks and I speak about economic spaces and growing the manufacturing sector, concomitant with that is focusing not only on the urban areas but also on the rural areas, and it's the reason why we took the decision to construct the Moruga Industrial Park. And I'm pleased to say that I visited on last Friday together with a team from ETEC and UDECOT. The park is 48% complete, and Roscon, the construction firm, has committed to putting on now 3 teams to expedite completion. The actual completion of the park and its sheds, etc., not sheds, shells, will in fact be, believe it or not, July 2019. So we're quite pleased about that. We hope that it will be, by the time you have to complete and then ensure that you close on all of your other requirements, regulatory requirements. So I can see this being operational by the end of August. We are so very pleased about it. So if I can just give you a little bit of an update already. Work has advanced on all of the factory shells. So each one of them, it's 372 square meters, and there are 5 of them, and there are 5 particular, it's going to facilitate 5 particular sub-industries or areas of manufacturing or agribusiness, whatever you want to call it. Hot peppers, 1 for fish, 1 for root crops, 1 for cocoa and chocolate processing, and also 1 for fruit. And also there's an area which is identified for the processing of the Moruga Hill rice. And all of these we've set out and designed in line with all of the necessary specifications, including HACCP specifications, and so that will be necessary for export of these particular types of products. And I'm pleased to say that Kariri has also shown an interest in being at the park, offering their services to the new tenants and those small businesses, small agri-producers who will not be able to invest in all the necessary machinery and equipment, so that Kariri can in fact do contract manufacturing for those agro-processors that are still operating on a very small scale. So we are quite pleased about that development, again, which is to really bridge expansion at all in the agribusiness at all different levels. So we're working on the tenanting already between ETEC, InvestTT, in collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries, NAMDEFCO, and so on. And we look forward, I'm told that there are 10 potential investor leads already. Just let me say quickly that we've spoken quite a bit about the aluminum industry, and I had said when we were here on the last occasion that at Wallafield, the Alotech Research and Development Facility was in construction, and I can say to you that that is continuing, and we look forward to this facility being completed by the end of 2019. At this stage, I know that Alutech is involved in the refurbishing of the existing equipment, and it's quite a customized building, so we have to ensure that at some stage the equipment goes in through the roof, and then, of course, the roof is put on and so on after. That's the size and nature of the equipment which will be involved in the manufacture of these wheel hubs and so on. Something that I must speak about, Madam President, as we again focus on manufacturing, is a special economic zones policy, and you would have heard me speaking about that. So we have advanced considerably. This is so very important when we think about incentives, not only for the manufacturing sector, but also for all of the other areas which we wish to advance and focus on, including fish and fish processing and all of the agricultural industry and agro-processing also, but the creatives, financial services, software design and applications.
Honourable Senators, at this juncture, we will suspend the sitting and return at 2 p.m. Minister, you've utilized 26 minutes of your speaking time.